Okay, we're live.
Thank you. All right, welcome everybody to the Tax Abatement Review Board. It's Friday, May 7th, and it's just a little bit after 1:30. So this meeting is now called to order. Participants, I'm going to go from my left to my right. Brian Keller, our City Treasurer. Jackie Hudgens, who's representing the Chamber of Commerce. I'm the Mayor. Superintendent Roxanne Ramsey-Casario. Bruce Avens is here from City Council. Michael Pacini, the Treasurer of the Schools, is with us as well. And then, as far as the minutes are concerned, has everybody had a chance to review the minutes? And are there any corrections to those minutes?
Corrections.
All right. Hearing none, those minutes are approved. Let's go through the CRA recap, 2020 review. Brian, that's going to be you, right?
That's me. Yep.
Take it away.
Wait. All right. Before we get started, one of the things I wanted to point out to the board is an issue that was raised in the last meeting. So as we go through these, I don't want there to be any confusion. One of the things that we noticed last meeting was that according to city ordinance, there are three classes that, classes of abatements that are possible. Class 1, Class 2, and Class 3. Those each have different job requirements. In some cases, the agreements for some of these abatements have listed in their ordinance different job qualifications that they have to meet. So in order to determine compliance, we might either be determining compliance based on what these companies put in their applications for jobs required, which don't necessarily line up with Class 1, 2, or 3 options according to the ordinance. So I just want to throw that out there just so you know what we're looking at here. We will need to figure out how to resolve that going forward. In tax abatements going forward, we need to make sure that in the agreement it says that the jobs required line up with that of the Class 1, 2, or 3, not necessarily what they're anticipating bringing in. If that makes sense. Okay. Now we got that out of the way. We're going to start with KLC Properties. That's the first one on my list here, otherwise known as Poppy's Popcorn. This one should be simple. This is the 2020 was the last year of their abatement, so they have a 0% abatement, and they also have no job requirements. So they ended up bringing in 23. They had a surplus in jobs, so they had 23 full-time positions that they brought in. So I think this is just for reference. I'm not sure if we still need to determine compliance since there's really no job requirement at that point, since it's a 0% abatement. But that's for everyone's reference. Thank you. Okay. Next will be Lake Ridge Holdings. Same situation here. 2020 is the last year of their abatement, 0% abatement. And on your spreadsheet, you can actually see the total amount of taxes abated, for the duration of the 10 years. For this particular tax abatement, for Lake Ridge Holdings, they have $794,000 of total tax liability abated. The school's got a $50,000 donation spread over 5 years, $10,000 each year. And this is the last year of their abatement. So again, 0 job requirements, but they still had a surplus that had a variance of plus 20. So they did a good job with their jobs. Next, we have Uranium Alloys. 2020 was year 9 of their abatements. And with Uranium Alloys jumping over to the job column, according to their agreement, they need to bring in 60 jobs. They came in with 48 according to their documents they sent back to us, which is a variance of minus 12.
Did they give any explanation other than COVID?
No, the forms that we send to them, they don't provide any explanation. They just provide the raw numbers. For this particular abatement, there's no school donation that was required. This is a Class 2 tax abatement, and we have 5 more years remaining on this abatement. Next, we have MVM, otherwise known as Norlake Manufacturing, 10-year abatement, Class 1. 2020, they had a 60% abatement for that year. And they have a job requirement of 30. Their report back to us was that they had 10 full-time employees and 1 part-time employee. We usually consider part-time employees as half for our calculation. So they're at a -20 right now in terms of jobs. The school donation was $5,000 for 5 years. So far, they've had $169,000 abated so far through the first 7 years. Back to the school donation, they didn't have a date stipulated in their agreement. They just said $5,000, so they had no date. You'll see in some of these other ones, they have specific dates when they're due. This one did not. All right, next we'll jump over to Rudolph Libby, otherwise known as Gem Inc., Gem Energy, RLG Cleveland. This one's just getting started. 2020 was year 2. This is a Class 2 tax abatement. Again, no school donation was required for this abatement. And jumping over to the jobs required, they had 50. Their report back to us was 58 jobs required. They've got a surplus of 8 jobs, so they're in the positive in terms of jobs. All right, next we'll go to Lemon and Lemon, which is North Ridgeville Senior Living, otherwise known as Danbury. 2020 was the first year for this tax abatement. 100% is abated. Years 1 through 10. This is a Class 2 donation. Their school donation is 50% of the total tax liability abated. And this agreement, the donation is due on March 15th. Their jobs required were 47 full-time, 42 part-time. They came in with 32 full-time and 12 part-time. Since it's their first year and also on top of COVID, I would imagine that that's probably the reason for such the large variance.
Yeah, for a while they were not accepting new residents, so I would think that would have a tremendous impact on their ability to hire people.
All right, next we'll jump to Progressive North Ridgeville, otherwise known as Avenue at North Ridgeville. Again, this was the first year, 2020 was the first year, 100% tax abatement. This is a Class 3 tax abatement. The school donation is 50% of the tax liability abated. This is also due by March 15th. Their jobs required was 100 full-time, 20 part-time. Their report back to us was 19 full-time and 4 part-time. This is a very, very large variance, but again, I would suspect that it's due to the same reason. One thing to note is, according to the ordinance, it doesn't stipulate if they're full-time or part-time employees for Class 1, 2, and 3. I think those have just been added to the agreement and they've been required to uphold those when it's not necessarily part of what Class 1, 2, or 3 is defined as. So that's just something to consider as you vote for compliance. Keep in mind, Class 3 is 100% tax abatement for 15 years, all 15 years. Lastly, we've got Arcterra. That's over on Cook Road. This is a Class 1 tax abatement. This is the first year of that abatement. 2020 was the first year. They have a requirement for $2,500 school donation per year for the first 5 years. That is due by July 15th. Their job required is 10. They reported back to us 10 full-time and 1 part-time, so they are spot on with their job requirement according to Class 1. We do have 2 others that have been approved that don't need any review, but I will just acknowledge them. They don't need your vote or any compliance. Young Explorers and Montessori School has been approved. I'm not sure about their construction status. Once they become more than 50% complete, Lorain County will assign an appraised value at that point in time. So once that occurs, that's when the abatement will actually start. They do have an agreed school donation of $10,000 for 5 years and an additional $5,000 in the 6th year. So the schools will be getting $55,000 from this abatement. We anticipate, well, I don't know. Does anyone know about the construction status of that?
They're doing a lot of earthwork still, so I don't know when they'll be up on the vertical.
So it may not start till next year. If that's the case, then we'll adjust the spreadsheet accordingly. And the last one that's been approved is Discount Drug Mart. They do have a school donation due April 30th, and the schools is set to receive a substantial amount in school donations, $40,000 for 10 years, plus an additional $25,000 for the 11th and 12th years. And again, that's under construction. That's going to be a Class 2 tax abatement, which means that they need to bring in 50 jobs within 3 years to the city. And that is something else to keep in mind. Class 1, 2, and 3 each have stipulations on how long you have to create those jobs. Class 1, you have 2 years to create 10 jobs. Class 2, you have 3 years to create 50 jobs. Class 3, you have 3 years to create 100 jobs. And that is it for the review.
Discount Drug Mart, they're trying to open by the end of the year. We'll see how that goes. So that one might be bumped as well then.
It could be. Yeah, it just depends on when the county determines it's 50% complete. So.
Yeah. And don't they do that in June?
Well, they do it after they get the permits. They wait to get the permits and then they keep an eye on it after that. So it could be any time.
Okay, all right, well.
For new construction.
Yeah, 50%, it won't be for a while still.
Could you repeat the job creation numbers for the classes?
Yeah, so Class 1, you have to create 10 jobs within 2 years. Class 2, you have 50 jobs. You have 3 years to do that. Class 3 is 100 jobs. You also have 3 years to do that. There's also a building size for each of those classes. For Class 1, the minimum building size there is none. Class 2, the minimum building size is 25,000 square feet. Class 3, the minimum building size is 50,000 square feet.
Brian, you want to give Michael that chart?
Yeah, Mike, I can email that to you as well.
Thank you.
All right. So we'll go back to the beginning, go through these. The first 2 are simple and straightforward. I don't know that there's any action that we even need to take on them because both Poppy's Popcorn and Center Ridge Health Campus are finished zeros at this point. So we'll just move on past those. We've got the big one to talk about. Might have printed on both sides, so I'm not sure which order I have these in now, but Uranium Alloys is down 12 jobs from where they're supposed to be. Obviously, COVID would have some impact on their business, but they're not required to make a school donation. Do we want to continue to allow them to have the abatement at this point?
Industry or Dan?
Uranium Alloys is a metal. They manufacture metal things.
They do like wiring for radar
Yes.
systems and planes and things like that. So they have a lot of government contracts, anything electronic usually has some sort of radium alloys metal in it. Battleships, aircraft, things like that.
Okay, so
It's a pretty cool operation. But one thing to note is, I'm not a voting member, but I'll just throw this out there. They were down 17 at one point and 15 at one point in years 3 and 4. I know you have 3 years to create those jobs for the class 2, but they were still in compliance back then.
And Brian, what was the rationale behind not having the school donation associated with this one?
I can't answer that. I wasn't here during that time. I don't know why there wouldn't be a school donation. It could have been something that after the fact, they realized that the schools were losing out. So maybe after some of these agreements had been in place for a couple of years, they realized the schools wanted to get money and they started requiring that as part of the agreement.
Mm-hmm.
So this could have been one that just got agreed upon with no school donation in mind.
that would have been something determined at the time of the agreement, whenever it was drafted.
Correct, at the initial agreement. Yeah, so that would have been in 11?
I believe Mayor Gillick is the one that pushed for the school donation.
Yeah, I don't remember when that went into effect, but you can see these first two that we were discussing were adopted in 2010, and there was a school donation. I don't have an answer for you as to why they
Yeah.
don't have a donation requirement. We'll see that coming up with Rudolph Libby as well. We could pull the legislation and see in the minutes and get that to you.
Do we know what their revenue is?
No, I don't have that information in front of me, but sure can be attained.
I mean, these two businesses have a significant higher number of employees. Maybe that's why they didn't have to do the school donation, because they would be bringing in more money, having more employees, city income tax wise. But, they haven't been making it for quite a few years, and we've put them in compliance. So without seeing the original agreement, but I mean, that's the only thing I can see that would compensate for it, is the number of jobs they said they were gonna bring to the city.
Mm-hmm. Well, in the grand scheme of things, the amount that is abated is not a tremendous amount. We're talking about $16,000 at this point. So I don't know what that equates to, like 60% goes to the schools. So we're talking about still a decent number. At this point, though, without some additional information, I'm going to recommend that we allow them to continue with their abatement.
Interesting, their assessed valuation decreased. And the overall theme of the city would say the opposite. Do we know why?
Yeah, those figures are just the figures that that's the actual abatement amount.
No, he's talking about the
The
appraised
market
market
value.
value, that decreased as well, which
I don't,
actually,
excuse me, for a manufacturer, I don't think that would be all that uncommon.
well, I know if you look, Michael, both at Poppies and Center Ridge, their valuation had also decreased over time. The only one that's,
It's a lot.
yeah, Norlake is going down as well. The only one that's been somewhat consistent is Rudolph Libby. From all the ones that we have in front of us.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I know valuations, remember they reappraise every 3 years. They do an interim step and they're required to do both 3 years and 6 years. And I know property values did decrease over some period of time. Wasn't it the last 3 years?
No.
Was it 3 years before that? It's all blended
Based on
together.
personal experience.
Yeah. Anyway, I don't have an answer. You know, a lot of the times they can apply for a reduction for whatever reason at the county, and we saw that recently with Riddell. Went through the state.
I pulled up the resolutions if you want me to print them out for you regarding.
Could you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
As I said, though, that's evaluation for manufacturers. It's not unusual at all because they're basically planning for obsolescence.
Well, we're waiting on Uranium. Let's move on to the next one. Norlake Manufacturing. Looks like they've been consistently under the jobs requirement since the very beginning. Past boards have deemed them to be in compliance despite that variance. School donation is finished. Again, the amount is now $16,000.
Mayor, I will say, if you guys are thinking about this, this is an exact example of what I was talking about. Class 1 job requirements is 10, according to the city ordinance. In the agreement, it states that they've been granted a class 1, but it also states a contrary job requirement figure of 30. So both figures are in play in legislation. So I guess it's up to us to figure out how we want to interpret that.
Okay.
And I have an example of the city ordinance here for KLC properties, because they're another one.
Okay. So in this instance, you're suggesting that they, under our ordinance, they would only need to have 10 jobs. And that's what they have.
And yes, it says both. It says class 1, but it also says 30.
Okay.
Those are two separate things.
Maybe we should take a look at that. Yeah, straighten that out.
So if you're looking at 10, then they're in good shape.
Brian, is this essentially the same application that we're using today?
Yeah, the application's the same. What I found that's happened is the application has been translated into the actual agreement. And one of the questions on the application is, how many jobs do you anticipate bringing into the city? And so that, whatever figure is provided has been used to draft the agreement and then approved by city council. So I think what I would recommend doing forward is take out the job application, or the question on the job, or the application for jobs. I won't say job application, that's not what it is. Application for a vacant. And then taking that out of the agreement and only putting in what they qualify for, class 1, class 2, or class 3. That way we know exactly how many jobs are required. But it's kind of like for this one.
Was there a secondary resolution in regard to going back to Uranium Alloys? Because the resolution actually refers to them as class 1.
Does it?
It does.
There could have been.
And so we're talking about a difference of 50 required jobs based on a class 1 versus what the requirement is.
Right.
And I believe the requirement in there is actually 50. So we have 3 different numbers that we're trying to determine.
I don't see anything else. Those were the only two that were pulled up under that name.
So there's a reference in here that they relocated, or all 50 employees were being relocated to North Ridgeville. They were only looking to hire 5 to 10 in 2011 and 2012. That's,
Maybe the 60 came from the
That's-
50 plus 10.
yes,
We need to modify this then.
under the idea that they were bringing 50 employees in, then they're only down 2 from that.
Right.
Mhm. All right. So I'll go back and renew my motion to allow Uranium Alloys to continue to receive their abatement under the terms of the ordinance or resolution. Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Yes.
Aye.
Moving on then to Norlake. Okay, and again, Brian, you were pointing out that the class 1, they need to have 10 employees.
Mhm.
They have 10 employees. We're not really sure where the 30 came from.
It was probably that's probably what they included in their application, which
Right.
got translated into the actual agreement.
Mhm.
That's my guess.
Right. Okay. I'll make the motion then that we allow Norlake to continue to have their abatement under the terms of the resolution.
I'll second it.
All those in favor say yes?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Moving on. All right. Rudolph Levy. Rudolph Levy seems to be doing what they're supposed to. They'll pull the resolution, find out why they weren't required to give an abatement or a school donation. Not really sure why. But they do have the jobs that they're required to have. You want to look at that before we vote on that one?
I don't. I would like to see it at some point, but I think because it was put in place prior to, the arrival of myself and Mr. Cassini, I think moving forward, we just have a better idea of what to look for with new businesses, but this is something that's already been in place.
Okay. Then I'll make the motion that we allow Rudolph Levy to continue to receive their abatement under the resolution.
I'll second.
David, say yes.
Yes.
Moving on to Danbury. 11. So we discussed, Danbury opened, I remember doing their grand opening like a couple of weeks before Corona hit. So I know that they did not have the number of staff that they thought they were going to, and certainly not the number of residents that they thought they were going to. So at this point, they made their school donation right back on March 15th. they're doing what they're supposed to as far as everything except the jobs. So at this point, I will make the motion that we continue the limit abatement.
I'll second.
All those in favor say yes?
Yes.
Yes,
Keep in mind, Mayor, they do have 3 years to get those jobs.
right. Thank you. Okay. Moving on to Progressive North Ridgeville, which they also made their school donation on March 15th, their proposed number of jobs. And as you're pointing out, they still have a couple of years to get up to that number, but they were severely impacted by COVID as well. So at this point, they're doing what they're supposed to as far as the school donation is concerned. So I'll make the motion that we continue the abatement for Progressive North Ridgeville.
I'll second.
All those in favor say yes?
Yeah.
Yes. Opposed, say no. All right. Moving on to Arcterra. Arcterra also, in the first year of their abatement, school donation is scheduled, or no, was sent in last year, or what is it scheduled for this year? Anybody know?
I don't
Taxes
think-
paid in 21, so I'm guessing that their donation would make that this year, July 15th. So they've got the number of jobs required, they're on track. So I'll make the motion that Arcterra continues to receive its abatement.
I'll second.
All those in favor say yes?
Yes.
Yes. And then finally, we've got Montessori School, Young Explorers. They're still under construction, so there's really nothing to vote on there, or Discount Drug Mart. They're also under construction, so their abatement hasn't started. Anybody have any comments, questions, concerns?
The ones with a school donation that have no date, how does that work? Like date as of payment?
Yeah, so we reviewed the agreements for all of these, and there was no date stipulated in that specific agreement. Along those same lines, I can't tell you why some dates are March, some dates are July. I don't know. I just read the agreement and that's what it said. Now, if you want to going forward, we could maybe get some consistency there and making sure they have one and knowing exactly what date it's supposed to be. And that would, be up to you guys to figure out what you would like. But that's
Yeah,
just
that would be great. And I don't know if there's any way that if we can work with these places to at least try to get them within a month, so that we know for projections, for forecasting, so that, we don't get one of them in February and the other one in November.
Yeah, our office sends out reminder letters to those facilities.
Okay.
So going forward, is there a month that you would prefer?
I don't necessarily have a preference on the month that is stipulated, but I think I would like there to be a month.
Okay.
It's more so my issue is with when there's nothing at all, because it's hard for me to.
Absolutely. I think the ones that don't have any date at all, though, are finished with their school donation. So
Are they?
yes, if you look at, going back to the beginning, like Poppies is done and, Center Ridge is finished. There's no donation from Uranium or Door Lake is finished as well. So then you start in with Rudolph Libby, which doesn't have a donation, but then Danbury, theirs is scheduled for March 15th. Progressive is also March 15th, so your two assisted living nursing home type facilities are the same time frame. Then you've got Arcterra, which is July 15th. Young Explorers Montessori is also July 15th. And then, I don't know where April 30th came from, but Discount Drug Mart is April 30th. So you've got two in March, one in April, and one in July. So if you want to suggest a month for us, we'll be happy to make that consistent going forward.
Yeah, I mean, like a July, like an August would be great.
Okay, Yeah.
Either spring or fall is fine.
okay. All right,
So like a February, March, or like a July, August, either or would be completely fine.
okay. We're trying to work with the business. I don't know in their flow of monies, which they would prefer. Would it matter if we used both of those timeframes, like picked a
Give them the option.
February and a July, for example?
Mhm.
Okay. I'm gonna write that down, Brian. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Any other comments? We'll pull the one legislation to find out why there wasn't a donation required.
All of the school donations that are made, those are paid to the city, correct?
It should go right to you.
They come right to us?
We did have somebody try to pay us though one time. We didn't take it.
We appreciate
We sent it.
that.
Yeah.
La, 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 I didn't hear that.
I'm thinking of, what am I thinking of? TIF. Thinking of TIFs. We have TIFs, zones, these are abatements.
Yes.
And then is there something else?
Yeah, there's enterprise zones, but we don't have those.
Yeah. we don't have any of them.
Thank you.
Sure. I think all of our TIFs are non-school TIFs, so I don't think there's any impact to the schools with any of our TIFs.
Walgreens is the school too.
Was it?
So that's the only.
But isn't that finished?
We have one more year?
Okay.
There's a lot of TIF zones.
Yes, there are, but we specifically set them up so they were not school TIFs. So. All right. Anything else? This meeting's adjourned.